The wind howled through the streets of Anchorage on a bitter February morning in 2024, when Detective Sarah Chen stood before a weathered evidence box marked Case 9644721 open. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the lid, not from the cold, but from the weight of 28 years of unanswered questions. Inside lay the remnants of a mystery that had haunted Alaska's largest city for nearly 3 decades: the disappearance of 7-year-old Emma Hartley. March 15, 1996. Spring was just beginning to break through Alaska's long winter when Emma Hartley disappeared from her neighborhood in South Anchorage. She had been playing in her front yard, building what she called a snow fort from the last remnants of winter's final storm. Her mother, Patricia Hartley, had checked on her at 3:47 p.m. She remembered the exact time because she'd glanced at the kitchen clock while preparing an early dinner. When Patricia looked out the window again at 4:15 p.m., the yard was empty. The snow fort stood half-finished. Emma's red mittens lay abandoned on the ground, and her daughter was gone. The investigation that followed was immediate and massive. Anchorage Police Department mobilized every available officer. Volunteers combed through nearby Kincaid Park, searched along the coastal trail, and knocked on every door within a 5-mile radius. Helicopters circled overhead. Search dogs tracked Emma's scent to the end of her street, where it mysteriously vanished. Detective Robert Morrison, the lead investigator at the time, interviewed over 300 people in the first week alone. Neighbors reported seeing nothing unusual: no strange vehicles, no suspicious individuals. Emma had simply vanished as if she'd been plucked from the earth by invisible hands. The Hartley family became fixtures on local news. Patricia's tear-stained face appeared on every television screen in Alaska. Emma's father, David Hartley, a civil engineer for the state, offered a $50,000 reward for information. The community rallied, holding candlelight vigils and posting thousands of flyers bearing Emma's school photograph, a smiling girl with auburn braids and a gap-toothed grin. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, hope began to fade like the midnight sun giving way to winter darkness. Detective Morrison refused to give up. Even as the case file grew thicker with dead-end leads and false sightings, he continued working it on his own time. He investigated Emma's parents thoroughly, standard procedure that caused additional pain to an already devastated family. Both Patricia and David passed polygraph tests. Their alibis were airtight. The detective examined every registered offender within a 100-mile radius. He followed up on reports of Emma being seen in Seattle, Vancouver, and even as far away as California. Each lead evaporated under scrutiny. One theory suggested Emma had wandered into the nearby woods and succumbed to the elements, despite the relatively mild weather that day. Extensive searches found nothing. Another theory pointed to a random abduction by someone passing through Anchorage, but the timing seemed too precise, too opportunistic. Morrison developed a particular interest in 3 individuals. Thomas Brennan, a delivery driver who had been in the neighborhood that afternoon. He claimed he'd finished his route by 3:30 p.m. and driven straight to the distribution center. Security footage from the center showed him arriving at 4:45 p.m., plenty of time to have been involved. But his delivery logs checked out, and he had no criminal history. Margaret Sloan, a neighborhood woman who had lost her own daughter to illness 2 years earlier. Some neighbors reported she'd been acting strangely, talking about her deceased daughter as if she were still alive. But Margaret had been at her therapist's office until 4:30 p.m. on the day Emma disappeared, with appointment records and witnesses to confirm it. Carl Henderson, a maintenance worker at Emma's elementary school who had resigned abruptly 3 weeks after her disappearance. He'd moved to Fairbanks, and when Morrison tracked him down, Henderson admitted he left because he couldn't handle the sadness everywhere. Background checks revealed nothing suspicious, and he had a solid alibi. He'd been repairing boilers at the school until 5:00 p.m. that day, confirmed by multiple staff members. Every avenue led nowhere. By 1998, the case was officially designated cold. Morrison retired in 2004, passing the file to younger detectives, but none could crack it. The box sat in the evidence room, a silent testament to failure, gathering dust alongside hundreds of other unsolved cases. Emma's parents never moved from their home, hopping against hope that their daughter might somehow find her way back. David died of a heart attack in 2015. Patricia remained, now in her 70s, still keeping Emma's bedroom exactly as it had been in 1996. Detective Sarah Chen joined the Anchorage Police Department's Cold Case Unit in 2019. Unlike many of her colleagues who preferred to work recent cases with fresh evidence, Chen was drawn to the old mysteries, the ones that had defeated previous investigators. In January 2024, she pulled Emma Hartley's file almost on a whim. She'd been sorting through cases from the 1990s, looking for any that might benefit from modern forensic techniques. Emma's case caught her attention for a simple reason. The complete lack of physical evidence seemed statistically improbable. When someone disappears, they leave something behind, Chen told her partner, Detective Marcus Webb, as they reviewed the file together. Hair, fiber, footprints, DNA, something. Emma's case has nothing. Absolutely nothing. That's not luck, that's deliberate. Webb, a veteran detective who'd seen his share of impossible cases, nodded thoughtfully. So you're thinking someone sophisticated, someone who knew how to avoid leaving evidence. Or someone close enough to the family to have access without raising suspicion, Chen replied. She spread out crime scene photographs across her desk. The images showed Emma's abandoned snow fort, her red mittens, the quiet suburban street. Chen began her investigation by doing what every good detective does. She started from scratch, ignoring previous assumptions and theories. She requested all original evidence be retested using modern DNA analysis techniques that hadn't existed in 1996. She tracked down everyone who had been interviewed during the original investigation, many now scattered across the country or deceased. She spent a week reading every page of Morrison's meticulous notes. The retired detective had been thorough almost to a fault, documenting every conversation, every hunch, every dead end. Chen noticed something interesting. Morrison had interviewed a teenager named Blake Copeland 3 times, more than most witnesses. Blake had been 15 in 1996, living 2 streets over from the Hartleys. His mother had called police the day after Emma's disappearance to report that Blake had come home around 4:30 p.m. that afternoon, acting nervous and jumpy. When Morrison interviewed Blake, the teenager explained he'd been startled by a loud noise while cutting through the woods near the Hartley house. Just a branch falling, he'd said. Morrison's notes indicated the detective had been skeptical but had no grounds to push further. Blake had no criminal record, was an honor student, and had no connection to Emma beyond living in the same general neighborhood. They'd never played together, attended the same school, or had any documented interaction. The interviews ended there. Chen decided to locate Blake Copeland, now 43 years old. It took 3 days of database searches and phone calls, but she finally found him. Blake Copeland was now Dr. Blake Copeland, a successful pediatrician living in Portland, Oregon. The fact that he worked with children sent a chill down Chen's spine. She flew to Portland with Webb, arriving unannounced at Copeland's pristine suburban clinic. The doctor agreed to speak with them, seeming surprised but cooperative. He was tall, well-dressed, with graying hair at his temples and an easy professional manner. "I wondered if someone might contact me eventually," Copeland said as they sat in his office. "I've thought about Emma Hartley often over the years. It was traumatic for the whole community." "You were interviewed 3 times back in 1996, Chen noted, watching his face carefully. "That's more than most witnesses." Copeland nodded. "Detective Morrison was very thorough. I think my mother's call about me being nervous made me a person of interest initially, but I'd just been spooked in the woods. I was a jumpy teenager." "What were you doing in the woods that day?" Webb asked. "Taking a shortcut home from a friend's house. Jeremy Walters, he lived on Spruce Street. I used to cut through the woods all the time." Chen let the conversation continue, asking routine questions, establishing rapport. She noticed nothing particularly suspicious about Copeland's demeanor. He maintained eye contact, answered questions directly, showed appropriate concern about Emma's case. But as she'd learned in her years of investigation, the most dangerous predators are often the most charming. After the interview, Chen and Webb returned to Anchorage. Chen couldn't shake a nagging feeling, a detective's instinct that something was off. She dove deeper into Copeland's background, checking for any complaints against his medical license, any allegations, any red flags. Nothing. His record was spotless. Patient reviews were glowing. He volunteered at a children's hospital, donated to missing children's organizations, seemed to be a model citizen. "Maybe you're chasing shadows," Webb suggested gently. "Sometimes a witness is just a witness." But Chen wasn't satisfied. She requisitioned Copeland's complete financial records, phone records, and travel history. She was looking for patterns, anything unusual. That's when she found it. In March 2023, 27 years after Emma's disappearance, Blake Copeland had purchased a storage unit in Wasilla, Alaska, about 40 miles north of Anchorage. The rental agreement showed he paid cash for a full year in advance. Chen felt her pulse quicken. Why would a Portland-based doctor need storage in Alaska? She checked Copeland's travel records. He'd flown to Anchorage twice in 2023, once in March when he rented the unit, and again in July. Each visit lasted less than 48 hours. "He's coming back," Chen said to Webb, pointing at the records. "After all these years, he's still coming back." They obtained a warrant for the storage unit. Chen insisted on being present when it was opened, even though it meant a drive to Wasilla on a freezing February morning. She stood outside Unit 247 as a uniformed officer cut the lock, her breath forming clouds in the Arctic air. The door rolled up. Inside was nearly empty, just a few cardboard boxes stacked neatly against the back wall. Chen pulled on latex gloves and approached carefully. She opened the first box. Inside were newspaper clippings, hundreds of them, all about Emma Hartley. The second box contained more clippings, these from other missing children cases across the Pacific Northwest. Emma's articles were marked with yellow highlighter, certain passages underlined. The third box made Chen's blood run cold. Inside was a child's red mitten. Even after 28 years, she recognized it from the crime scene photos. Next to it lay a small notebook filled with handwritten entries, a journal of sorts. Chen carefully photographed everything before touching the notebook. With gloved hands, she opened to the first page, dated March 16, 1996, one day after Emma disappeared. "It's done, easier than I thought, no one saw," The woods kept the secret. Chen and Webb worked through the night at the Anchorage Police Department, reading every page of Blake Copeland's journal. It was a confession written in real time, a chronicle of a crime and its aftermath that spanned nearly 3 decades. The entries painted a disturbing picture. In 1996, 15-year-old Blake Copeland had been struggling with what he called dark thoughts. He'd been watching Emma play in her yard for weeks, taking different routes home just to pass by her house. On March 15, he'd made a decision. According to the journal, Blake had approached Emma in her yard, claiming he'd found an injured puppy in the woods and asking if she could help. Emma, trusting and kind-hearted, had followed him. Once they were deep enough in the woods that her house was out of sight, Blake had attacked her. The journal didn't provide graphic details, for which Chen was grateful, but it confirmed Emma had died that day. Blake had hidden her body in a location he'd scouted previously, covering it with branches and snow. He'd then calmly walked home, arriving at 4:30 p.m. when his mother noticed his nervous behavior. But what haunted Chen most were the entries that followed over the years. January 1997, I think about her every day. They'll never find her where I put her. The creek swelled during spring thaw. Nature is hiding my secret. August 1999, started college today, pre-med. I want to help children now. Maybe this is my penance. December 2004, graduated medical school. I'm going to be a pediatrician. No one would ever suspect. I've become exactly what I needed to be. March 2011, 15th anniversary, I drove by the Hartley house. Mrs. Hartley still lives there. I almost stopped to tell her. Almost. June 2018, I'm a good doctor. My patients love me. Sometimes I forget what I did. Then I remember Emma's face and I know I'll never really forget. March 2023, getting older. Paranoid about evidence. Moved the mitten to storage in Alaska. Couldn't destroy it. It's all I have left of that day. The final entry was from July 2023. Had a dream she was still alive. Woke up crying. I've spent my whole life trying to balance the scales. Saved hundreds of children. Does it matter? Can it ever matter? No. Emma Hartley deserves justice. Her mother deserves to know. I'm just too weak to confess. Chen closed the journal, her eyes stinging with tears of anger and relief. After 28 years, they finally had their answer. But they needed more than a journal. They needed Emma. The journal entries contained veiled references to Emma's burial location, but nothing specific enough to navigate by. Phrases like, where the creek bends east, and beneath the old growth, could apply to dozens of locations in the expansive wilderness around Anchorage. Chen had Blake Copeland arrested in Portland on suspicion of murder. The arrest shocked his colleagues, his patients, and the Portland community. Dr. Copeland, one parent told reporters, that's impossible. He saved my daughter's life when she had pneumonia. He's a hero. But the evidence was undeniable. During interrogation, Copeland initially invoked his right to an attorney and remained silent. Chen watched from behind one-way glass as he sat motionless, his face expressionless. The confident, charming doctor had been replaced by a hollow shell. After 6 hours, his attorney arrived, a high-powered defense lawyer named Richard Marsh who specialized in impossible cases. They conferred for 30 minutes. Then Marsh made an unexpected announcement. My client wishes to cooperate fully, Marsh told Chen and the prosecution team. He'll provide the location of Emma Hartley's remains. In exchange, we're asking for the death penalty to be taken off the table. Alaska had abolished the death penalty in 1957, but Copeland could potentially be charged federally. The prosecution agreed to the terms with one condition. Copeland had to take them to Emma's exact location, and if they didn't find her remains, all deals were off. 2 days later, Chen found herself back in Alaska, leading a convoy of police vehicles, forensic teams, and cadaver dogs into the woods near the Hartley neighborhood. Blake Copeland, shackled and wearing an orange jumpsuit, sat in the back of a transport van, providing directions. "Stop here," he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. They were deep in the woods, nearly 2 miles from Emma's house, farther than anyone had searched in 1996. A creek ran nearby, exactly as the journal had described. "She's there," Copeland pointed to a cluster of spruce trees. "Beneath the largest one. I covered her with rocks and branches, I thought animals might disturb her otherwise. I wanted her to rest peacefully." Chen felt rage boiling in her chest. This monster wanted credit for treating his victim's body with respect. But she maintained her professional composure as forensic teams began carefully excavating the area. It took 4 hours. When they found the first bone, Chen had to step away. She stood by the creek, taking deep breaths of the sharp February air, trying to maintain control. Emma had been 7 years old. She'd had her whole life ahead of her. By nightfall, they'd recovered a complete skeleton, small and heartbreakingly fragile. The forensic anthropologist confirmed what they already knew. It was a child, approximately 7 years old, buried for approximately 28 years. Dental records would provide final confirmation, but Chen already knew. They'd found Emma Hartley. News of Blake Copeland's arrest and Emma's discovery spread through Anchorage like wildfire. The local stations interrupted regular programming with breaking news bulletins. Social media exploded with reactions ranging from relief to fury to grief. Chen's phone rang constantly with interview requests, but she ignored them all. There was one call she needed to make personally. She drove to the Hartley house on a quiet Sunday morning. Patricia Hartley answered the door, now 73 years old, her auburn hair completely white. She looked at Chen's face and simply said, "You found her." "Yes, ma'am, we found Emma. I'm so sorry it took so long." Patricia's knees buckled. Chen caught her, helping the elderly woman to a couch. Through tears, Patricia whispered, Thank you for bringing my baby home." They sat together for an hour while Chen explained everything. The journal, the storage unit, Copeland's confession and cooperation. Patricia listened in silence, occasionally nodding, processing information about her daughter's final moments that she'd waited 28 years to know. "He became a pediatrician," Patricia said finally, her voice hollow with disbelief. "He spent his life helping children after he killed mine." "People process guilt in different ways," Chen said quietly. "Some never feel it. Others feel it so intensely they spend their entire lives trying to atone. But atonement doesn't equal justice." "Will he go to prison forever?" "Yes, I'll make sure of it." The community's reaction to Copeland was intense and divided. Some people, particularly parents of children he'd treated, struggled to reconcile the caring doctor they knew with the teenager who'd committed murder. Others felt betrayed, angry that a killer had hidden among them for decades, trusted with their most precious possessions, their children. Detective Robert Morrison, now 78 and retired in Arizona, gave one interview to a local Anchorage station. "I knew we'd missed something," he said, his voice breaking. "I interviewed that kid 3 times. I had a feeling but no evidence. Nothing. It's haunted me for nearly 30 years." Chen reached out to Morrison privately. "You did everything right," she told him over the phone. "In 1996, you didn't have the technology we have now. DNA analysis, digital forensics, financial tracking, none of that existed then like it does today. And Copeland was smart. 15 years old, but smart enough to destroy evidence, to have a planned story, to act normal. You couldn't have known. I should have known, Morrison insisted. A good detective knows. A good detective follows the evidence, Chen countered. And there wasn't any. You didn't fail Emma. The limitations of the time failed her, but we finally got there. We brought her home. Blake Copeland's trial began in September 2024. Despite his confession and cooperation, Alaska state law required a full trial. His attorney, Richard Marsh, mounted a defense based on Copeland's age at the time of the crime, 15 years old, arguing for leniency based on juvenile status and subsequent rehabilitation. Look at what Dr. Copeland became, Marsh argued during his opening statement. A healer, a man who dedicated his entire adult life to saving children. Yes, he committed a terrible crime as a disturbed teenager, but he spent 30 years making amends, saving countless lives. That has to count for something. The prosecution, led by State Attorney Diana Reeves, was having none of it. Emma Hartley was 7 years old, Reeves told the jury, her voice steady and forceful. She liked to build snow forts and draw pictures and help her mother in the garden. She trusted Blake Copeland when he said he needed help with an injured puppy. She followed him into those woods believing she was doing a good thing, and he murdered her. Then he hid her body and went on with his life. He went to college, medical school, built a career, got married, had a life. Emma Hartley got none of those things. Her parents spent 28 years not knowing if their daughter was alive or dead. Blake Copeland knew exactly where she was the entire time and said nothing. The defense wants you to credit him for becoming a pediatrician. I submit to you that his career choice was the ultimate disguise. What better way to hide in plain sight than to surround yourself with the very thing you destroyed? To be praised and celebrated for caring for children, while Emma Hartley's bones lay abandoned in the woods. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Chen testified for 2 days, walking the jury through the investigation, the discovery of the storage unit, the journal entries, the recovery of Emma's remains. She remained professional and thorough, even when Marsh tried to poke holes in her procedures. The most powerful testimony came from Patricia Hartley. Now frail and using a walker, she approached the witness stand with quiet dignity. The courtroom fell completely silent as she was sworn in. "Tell us about Emma," Reeves said gently. Patricia's face softened with memory. "She was sunshine. That's the only way I can describe her. Emma woke up every morning excited about the day. She loved everyone and everything. She wanted to be a veterinarian because she couldn't stand the thought of animals being hurt." "Did Emma know the defendant?" "No. We lived in the same general neighborhood, but Emma went to Huffman Elementary and Blake was in high school. They had no connection." "When did you realize Emma was missing?" Patricia's composure cracked slightly. "I looked out the window and she was gone, just gone. I ran outside calling her name. I searched the yard, the neighbors' yards. I called the police within 20 minutes. They came immediately, but it was already too late." "How did Emma's disappearance affect your life?" "It destroyed it," Patricia said simply. "My husband and I became different people. We lived in a nightmare that never ended. Every holiday, every birthday, hers and ours, was torture. We'd see girls who would have been Emma's age and wonder what she would have looked like. We never sold the house because we thought maybe she'd come back and need to find us. My husband died 9 years ago. The last thing he said to me was, maybe now I'll get to see our girl. He never stopped looking for her, even after the case went cold. It broke him. It broke both of us." There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even the judge had to pause to compose himself. When Marsh cross-examined, he was respectful but tried to establish that Patricia had found some closure. "Mrs. Hartley, I know this brings no real comfort, but has knowing what happened to Emma brought you any peace?" Patricia looked at him for a long moment. "It's brought me truth. That's not the same as peace. Nothing will bring me peace except having my daughter back, and that's impossible. But yes, knowing is better than not knowing. Being able to bury her properly, to say goodbye, that's something. Not much, but something." Blake Copeland testified in his own defense, against his attorney's advice. He took the stand on the trial's final day, looking older than his 43 years. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he began, his voice quiet. "I don't deserve it. I destroyed Emma Hartley's life and devastated her family. Nothing I can say will change that. I was 15 and disturbed. I've been having violent thoughts that I didn't understand and didn't tell anyone about. When I saw Emma that day, something inside me broke. I acted on an impulse I'd been fighting for months. Immediately afterward, I was horrified by what I'd done. I've been horrified every day since. I became a pediatrician because I wanted to save lives, to balance what I'd taken. I know that sounds self-serving, and maybe it was, but I've genuinely tried to be a good person, to help people, to make some small amends." Reeves rose for cross-examination. "Dr. Copeland, you kept a journal documenting your crime, correct?" "Yes." "You kept Emma's mitten in a storage unit?" "Yes." "You returned to Anchorage multiple times over the years, driving past the Hartley home, visiting Emma's burial site?" "Yes." "Did you ever, in 28 years, consider turning yourself in? Consider giving the Hartley family the truth they desperately needed?" Copeland was silent for a long moment. "Every day, but I was too cowardly to do it." "So while you were receiving awards for your pediatric work, being celebrated in your community, living a full life with a wife and career, Emma Hartley was decomposing in the woods, and her parents were living in agony?" "Yes." "And you consider yourself rehabilitated, redeemed?" "No," Copeland said, his voice breaking. "I don't. I'll never be redeemed. I tried to do some good before justice finally caught up with me." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They found Blake Copeland guilty of first-degree murder. At sentencing 2 months later, Patricia Hartley was given the opportunity to address Blake Copeland directly. She stood at the podium, her statement prepared but her hands still shaking. "Mr. Copeland, you took my daughter. You took my husband." His heart gave out from the grief of losing Emma. "You took 28 years of my life that I spent in uncertainty and pain. I've heard about the good work you did as a doctor. I've heard about the children you saved, and I'm glad those children lived. But it doesn't balance. There's no scale where saving 100 children equals murdering one. Emma was not a debt to be paid off through good deeds. I hope you live a very long life in prison. I hope you wake up every morning and remember what you took from this world. I hope you think about Emma every single day, just like I have. But I also want you to know something. I'm free now. For 28 years I was imprisoned by not knowing. You held that knowledge, kept it from me, kept me in chains. But now I know. I've buried my daughter properly. I've said goodbye. You don't have power over me anymore. Whatever happens to you, wherever you spend the rest of your life, you'll have to live with yourself. And I think that might be the worst punishment of all." Judge Michael Torres sentenced Blake Copeland to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In his statement, he noted, "Dr. Copeland, you have argued that your subsequent good work should be considered in mitigation. I acknowledge that you helped many people in your career, but I cannot ignore that every life you saved, every child you treated, was possible only because you successfully hid your crime for nearly 3 decades. You didn't confess. You didn't turn yourself in. You were caught. Had Detective Chen not reopened this case, had she not pursued evidence with exceptional skill and determination, you would have died a free man, celebrated as a hero, while Emma Hartley remained lost. This court sentences you to life imprisonment without parole. May you spend that life reflecting on the child you murdered and the family you destroyed. Detective Sarah Chen stood in Patricia Hartley's living room one final time, 6 months after the trial ended. Patricia had asked her to stop by before the estate sale. She was finally selling the house, moving to a smaller place near her sister in Seattle. "I wanted you to have something," Patricia said, handing Chen a small frame. Inside was Emma's school photo, the same one that had been on thousands of missing posters. "I can't accept this," Chen protested. "Please, you brought my daughter home. You gave me answers when I'd given up hope of ever having them. You deserve to remember her too." Chen looked at the photo, at Emma's gap-toothed smile and bright eyes, and felt tears threatening. "I'll keep it in my office, I promise." They embraced, 2 women bound together by a case that had defined both their lives, if only for a moment in time. As Chen drove away from the Hartley house, she thought about justice and closure, about the cases that get solved and the ones that don't. Emma's case had consumed 8 months of her life, but for Patricia Hartley, it had been 28 years. The arrest had indeed shocked the Anchorage community. A respected pediatrician, a seemingly model citizen, revealed as a child killer. The Portland community where Copeland had practiced was equally devastated, many of his patients struggling to reconcile the caring doctor they knew with the murderer he'd been. But in the end, the truth had emerged. The cold case had been solved. Emma Hartley had been found and laid to rest beside her father in Anchorage Memorial Park. Her headstone read, "Emma Rose Hartley 1989-1996 Forever 7, forever loved, forever remembered." Chen kept Emma's photo on her desk, a reminder of why cold cases matter, why persistence pays off, why justice delayed is not always justice denied. And whenever she felt discouraged by an impossible case, she looked at that gap-toothed smile and remembered. Sometimes, even after 28 years, the truth finds a way home.